Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus. The age of heroes has dawned, and the quest for optimal wellness continues here today with David Amerland, who is a Renaissance individual whose interests are far and wide, and he's delved into them deeply. And he created my favorite fitness site, Derby, which I've spoken of many times, and I've recommended to anyone and everyone that asks me about what I do for exercise. Greetings and welcome, David. How are you?
Hercules, I'm thrilled to be here. I need to correct you very quickly. I'm not the actual creator of Derby. That's Nail Ray, and that's her vision, but I'm 100% on board with that, and I've been there since the beginning, so I'm one of the originals.
Oh, okay. Thank you for correcting me. But still, your contribution is immeasurable, and I've interacted with you before. You're an awesome individual, and very dedicated to everything that you do. One of the things I like about the Derby site is I'm a storyteller. I like telling stories. And with the Dare Be exercise, you could customize the story, or you could follow stories like the journey or the Olympian challenge. So it's continuously living stories through exercise rather than through interactive storytelling or reading something or watching something. There's a interactivity with the story that I haven't found anywhere else. So I'm a big believer.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for bringing this up. Actually, we have, since the beginning, have always thought that the best way forward when it comes to exercise is to integrate the mind and the body a little bit.
Hmm.
And we found that the narrative that we create around the exercises we do was the best way to do it. And now we have the science to back this up. And if we get a chance later on, I'll bring in a few studies to actually show what happens. But because you said about sort of interactive exercises, we have also programs, and we're the first ones to pioneer that to a large extent. And the interactivity is actually quite fascinating because there are some programs like Age of Pandora, for example, which took us almost a year to test and perfect from inception to release. That actually has, it's almost like an open world. You can do anything in it, but everything which you do has a moral consequence.
Hmm.
So because you do something through the story and there's no right and wrong, it's very gray in terms of the morality of your actions, and you can justify it either way. It depends on how you see it and how you apply your own values to the storyline, so it actually draws you in. However, when we get to the end of the story, the impact that has is actually consequential, so it's fascinating.
Yeah, it's phenomenally fascinating. It's like kind of like the pick a bath adventures. I guess people might have grown up with those, except you're doing it through exercise and facing questions and answering them, such as the ones that you posed. My favorite is a journey, and I found that I can make it any journey by just slightly rewriting it depending on which journey I happen to be on. So I've been doing the labors of the Theban Hercules of antiquity, and the first time I did it, I tried the Amazons, and then I've changed it several times since then. So it's a very flexible system as well. And now I took a short break from the Olympian 28-day challenge because my occupational therapist and my physical therapist loaded me with new exercises. So I'm still trying to master them and integrate them. But I was on day 10 of the 28 days. So I'll be returning to that probably by the weekend. And
That's amazing.
it's very exciting, because you're doing more than just moving. You're living out an adventure in your mind and with your body, and that is incomparable. I'm not surprised that you pioneered it.
Thank you. Again, and we love the process, and we also love the challenge of coming up with fresh stuff every time, and that's quite sort of involving in how much effort we put in that.
Now, you've done a lot more than this, and even if you just did this and you were involved in bringing this to the world, I'd be eternally grateful, as would many other people. But you've also branched into other areas like strategic thinking. You wrote a book called
Mm.
Hypermind. You wrote several other books, and these books range in topic. So you're a very cerebral person from the topics that I see, and you're very well versed in the modern world that's emerging and everything you need not only to survive but to thrive in that world.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've written 19 books, and you're right. On the surface of it, they range from search engine optimization, where I've done a lot of work there. I was the first person to actually write a book about semantic search before it became a thing. And then I've done sort of digital marketing, digital branding, and trust and decision making, intentionality, and now fitness. But there is a uniting thread to this. There is actually a method to my madness. And in each case, what the uniting thread is us. It's people. The behavior we exhibit in that context, in that particular sort of area. And what I'm fascinated by is our operating system. Why do we do some things? Why don't we do other things? What is it that actually, what's the calculus in our head that makes us behave in a particular way, which is not optimal, doesn't always lead to the outcomes we want, even though logically we know what we should be doing. So that's what I go digging through and try to find answers to those questions.
Those books are on my to-read list as well because uh, I've asked myself those questions as have many other people, but you found answers, and I respect you highly, and I'm looking forward to exploring your answers.
Oh, that's great. And it's coming back to fitness, it's the same thing, right? I mean, if we take anybody, absolutely anybody off the street, and we say you need to be working out, you need to be fitter, you need to be leaner, you want to live a long and healthy life, you need to be doing these things, and they'll agree 100%. And then they don't do it. And then we need to find out why, because it's not lack of access, it's not lack of motivation, it's not lack of information. We have plenty of information coming at us from everywhere. So there are deeper things that actually hold us back, and also deeper calculations we apply when it comes to prioritizing our health. And sometimes this is way far from optimal.
We fall into patterns, I think, patterns that are dysfunctional, that might have served in the survival of our family through time, but might not optimally help us survive in our time. Like I've noticed even with my physical therapy, um, I had a spinal pain due to spinal arthritis and stenosis and bone spurs and slip discs, all within a few inches of each other. So I was able to address that through what I was doing and through physical therapy and occupational therapy. And what I noticed was even when there was no pain for me to react to, the natural inclination of my body was to scrunch itself and to stoop itself to accommodate a pain that wasn't there anymore.
Mm,
Even though I'm aware
absolutely.
of this and I catch myself doing it, it's very hard to break that pattern that established itself when I was in a greater degree of pain.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and you're right. I mean, this is a classic example. We get conditioned by things. And you're right in your assessment that we fall into patterns of behavior. Those patterns are reflective of deeper underlying drives. I mean, essentially we have two things. We have a brain and we have a body. The brain is a predictive machine and the body is an adaptive machine. And those two are fully integrated. And the integration itself is a huge challenge in terms of how do you power it? Where do you get energy from to actually do that predictive thing with your brain, which allows you to predict the next moment so you can actually know how to behave correctly so you can survive? And how does your body actually prioritize adaptations in order to allow it to survive in the environment it finds itself in? And if we go back 10,000 years ago, those questions would actually have been answered for us by the external forces that would apply on us and by the environment we actually find ourselves living in that past, right? So if you're in most practically 10,000 years ago, every community was a rural community. You'd have to climb and walk and lift and dig on an everyday basis. That's your life. It's not a lifestyle choice. It's not a sports activity. It's what you actually had to do to survive. So you became lean and strong and powerful and durable, depending in the context of that situation, what it actually demanded. And our brains, similarly, were designed to respond to threats, carrying out a predictive capability in order to predict the next threat, depending on the complexity of the situation we're in, depending on the environment and what forces applied on us, our brains function in that environment. And the energy that we got from that was that basically, in order for us to survive in that environment, which is energetically expensive, we had to conserve absolutely every amount of energy we had when we didn't have to expand it. So we kind of have a built-in lazy algorithm, if you like, which allows us to sit back and do nothing and just eat and rest every time, every opportunity we get. And at the same time, we look for shortcuts. 10,000 years later, all those things that allowed us to survive back then and thrive now hobble us. We tend to overeat, we tend to overrest, we tend to overreact sometimes to emotional situations. We tend to not do anything of the things which we should be doing because we think we don't have to. And it's true, we don't have to, right? We don't have to exercise, except that we actually do if we want to remain healthy. So the answer to all this is what you just said earlier. You have to be intentional. If you, like your body goes into reactive mode to something which is not there any longer. But if you are self-aware, if you're intentionally moving your body the way you want to, so that you are actually in control, if your brain is fully integrated into your body in terms of awareness, so that you're always aware of how you move, where you are, what your surroundings are, then that entire sort of pattern-driven proposition goes away. And then suddenly you lead the life that you want to actually live. And that's magical. It takes effort, it takes learning, it takes a certain amount of skill which has to be developed, but it's certainly within the grasp of everybody.
It definitely is within the grasp of everybody. I know that recently with my diagnosis of Parkinson's disease, I tried thinking of it in different ways, and one of the ways was, what does this give me that I wouldn't normally have a chance to have or to do? And one of the big pluses was to live healthy with Parkinson's, you should exercise obsessively. I'm making it more dramatic than it is, but several bouts of exercise per day. So I looked at it like, now I don't have an excuse not to exercise because I love exercising. So now I have to, for my health, exercise like 4 or 5 times a day. So that gives me a reason to do it, and nobody's going to argue with me. Why are you exercising so much? Because I have to. I have to do this to stay healthy. So it gives me that excuse, I guess, or that motivation. And also, I'm a meditator. I've meditated for years, and I'm a pretty positive person. And part of the Parkinson's is bouts of dark thoughts and depression and things like that. So I learned how to basically not fight that. I learned to listen to it, to thank it for its advice or in trying to protect me. But I have to make up my mind as to what I'm going to do. So I'm not going to listen to what my fear or any negative emotion tells me. So it's been more of a challenge to do that, but I've been able to do it. So um, I find that helps. I can't change the circumstances right now, but I could adapt to them quickly, and I could figure out what to do to thrive as much as I possibly can, given my current circumstances. Because, like you said, things change, and sometimes it's generational, sometimes it's within the course of your lifetime. Life can change in seconds. So it's how do I make the most of this new life?
Absolutely. And I love what you said. I mean, you're being intentional, you're being self-aware. And on top of that, you're developing the extra skill set, which allows you to both manage your illness better, navigate the situation, and actually take control of your life. And when we talk about depression, for instance, we know obviously it's a condition that affects so many individuals, but it's a brain thing in the way that the centers connect and how they talk to each other. So it's neurochemically driven. And to some extent, we have the ability, like you said, to actually mediate that and work our way through it.
Now, Built to Last is not only an exercise book. It's a book that touches on the human entity from a lot of different angles, and you tie them all well together at the end of the book. And I read on LinkedIn that you wrote this book because you didn't want people to suffer anymore. So with that, tell us all about Built to Last.
Thank you for that. And yes, in Built to Last, like every book, has an origin story. And, personally, I've been training all my life. And to some degree, I had a blind spot when it came to people who didn't train, because I couldn't understand why they didn't train. I mean, anybody can, right? So I thought, just go and train. So what happened was 2019, the pandemic came along and we found ourselves locked in our houses. And I've got a home gym now as a result of that, which is fully equipped. And I have a friend who lives nearby. And he also has a home gym. So once a week, we used to get together, and we still do, and exercise. And we talk. It's a social thing as well. So we exercise for a couple of hours. And you know that if you're exercising with a person, what happens, your attention is not so much on what you're doing, so you don't feel the intensity. And because you're with somebody else, you can now up the intensity without sort of feeling the negative effects of that tell you, whoa, wow, this is hard. So you actually go a little bit harder. So we do that and we talk. And he used to come with all these sort of things he'd read in magazines, or he'd see something on social media. And it kind of intrigued me. So I would come back with studies. And over a period of 2 years, the seed for the book was born. And I just realized, at the time I realized that suddenly there are real problems which hold people from training and exercising. And they have nothing to do with willpower and discipline and motivation. People are highly motivated to get fitter and healthier. And the reason they don't lies in that kind of ancient drives we don't always address in our human operating system. So Built to Last is designed to help us understand that better. So it's not a prescriptive book, because everybody's a little bit different. If you want to get fitter, you have to work out what fitness actually means for you. And then once you have that meaning for you, which is personal, then you're in a better position to do something. And what you do is going to differ depending on where you are, your access to gyms, your access to equipment, your socioeconomic conditions, your available time. So the book is designed to help you make fitness fit your life, as opposed to the other way around, which is kind of shoehorning things. So it's designed to make fitness lifelong for a person, but on their terms as opposed to mine. And that's the magic of it. That's how it sort of came about from those early discussions with my friend.
That is great. And what I've read so far made me want to read want to read more. It was just so all-encompassing. And you also touch upon the different types of diets and which ones are good for inflammation. And you focus a lot on inflammation throughout the book.
Absolutely. I mean, we kind of think that inflammation is a negative thing because we have been accustomed to hearing it in a negative context. The inflammatory response in the body is how we get adaptations. So if you go and lift weights, if you go and run, there's a certain amount of inflammation that happens in a system, and that is part of the adaptation process, which makes us stronger, fitter, more durable, and helps us take us to the next level. At the same time, we are exposed to many environmental stimuli which have an inflammatory effect in our system. We're exposed to foods and drinks which also have a detrimental effect. And when we're not aware of that, then that begins to work against us. And to sort of show how this works, let's say somebody goes and lifts weights, and the first time they've done it, the body is going to go into inflammation, their muscles become inflamed. The moment they become inflamed, they become de-strengthened. Now they're unable to repeat that workout the next day or the day after, depending on their level of fitness. Why? Because we have to go through the adaptive process where the body basically remakes itself and becomes stronger. Now imagine if we are constantly in an inflamed process, in an inflamed state, sorry. If we're in an inflamed state all the time, then we can't make the adaptations we want. We can't be as strong as we want. We can't be as healthy as we want. Our brain can't actually function properly because it is also subject to inflammatory processes. So understanding how to use inflammation to our benefit and how to reduce unwanted effects because of unwanted inflammation in our system is key to living longer, healthier, and feeling happier in our own body.
That is a very unique, to me anyway, way of looking at inflammation. And currently, I'm diabetic. I have type 2 diabetes also for very many years. So I've tried very many diets, and the one that works best for controlling my sugar for me is a high fat, high protein, low carb diet with not so much processed food, as much as possible natural food. But I liked how you presented the Mediterranean diet, and I'm willing to give that another check because of the way you broke it down. I could add those things like the omega-3s and the polyphenols to my current diet and modify it a little bit, and I could avoid some of the grains and other things that are on the Mediterranean diet that I did not have a good reaction to. So thank you for that as well.
Oh, you're most welcome. And I'm glad you mentioned this because essentially diet is fuel. If we take an analogy, we're like a car. It goes, yes, it has a structure and it has an engine, but if you don't put the right fuel in it, the best engine in the world can malfunction. And if you have a relatively poor engine in terms of engineering, if you put good fuel in it, it lives up to its maximum potential. So it gives you the best it can within what it actually has. So we have a genetic code in us. We have DNA for sure, which is the blueprint that actually builds us. But then there's a lot of things we can actually do to help that blueprint work better. So diet is one of it. And being aware of the foods that actually work for us, and there's a certain amount of experimentation that needs to take place here. Again, we can't be too prescriptive because everybody's different. They have different microbiome, they have different sensitivities, different types of allergies, etc. So everybody has to become, within that context, expert on themselves. And in the book, I say that, the only expert on you is you. Sure, people can say things, science can say things, but really only you know how you feel. Only you know how things work on you. Only you know how certain foods actually affect you. And the other thing I say is, that if we had throughout our life an expert chef, a dietitian, a personal trainer, and we had those three people following us throughout our life, being responsible for us, we would be perfect human beings. And we don't have them. Nobody has. So we have to become those experts for us if we want to be better.
And there are mental techniques for doing that. You can create imaginary friends. A lot of business books from days gone by had that. You create counselors that could be based on real people or fictional people, and through the process of having them inside your head and consulting with them, they would take on a life of their own and speak from that perspective. And then if they weren't advising you rightly, you could dissolve them and get somebody else.
I love that you said that. Absolutely. And there's actually science behind. I know it sounds weird. It sounds like you don't have enough friends, so you have to make up some. But actually, what it is, if we just get locked up in ourselves, then our brain processes things from one perspective only, and
Mm-hmm.
it becomes reactive because all we get is that single stimuli or that single sort of mass of stimuli that actually comes at us. And then we basically lose the ability to have that perspective, which allow us to mediate how we feel and then control how we think. But the moment we have this, we have a counselor in our head, or we have a therapist in our head, or we have a personal coach in our head, and that person, that imaginary person now gives us advice, what happens internally, we split up the resources a little bit. Now, that sounds like a bad thing, but it isn't, because the moment we split up the resources in our brain to model that persona, that imaginary persona, and see us from the outside in, then we also dampen down the intensity of certain signals we receive from the stimulus of the environment. So let's say we put this in the context of, I don't know, a 100-meter sprint. Always brutal, right? Because you go flat out, you have no time to basically take more than a couple of breaths. You're using up all your ATP, it's exhausting, and then you have to have that brain-body connection absolutely dialed up to the max. And if you just in your head getting ready to do that, all you can feel is how weak you are, how you haven't prepared adequately, how hard it's going to be. Your heart rate goes up, your blood pressure goes up, your blood temperature rises more than it should. All those things are detrimental. But if you have the coach telling you you prepared correctly, make sure you're going through a checklist perhaps of things to do. Now your attention is diverted. So suddenly your anxiety begins to drop. your cortisol levels begin to come down, you're calmer, you don't have as many heartbeats because your heart isn't elevated above what it should be. So suddenly you have more revs on the clock. So a person starting out with a heartbeat of 120 to do a 100-meter race, and somebody starting out on a heartbeat of perhaps 60 beats per minute, which is pretty low, they have totally different advantages. So the person with a lower heartbeat now can really push themselves harder. So that, that simple trick of basically having that imaginary perspective, somebody talking to you, and in psychology, they call this distancing, is absolutely fundamental in getting a better control of the inner world and also a better understanding of ourselves.
And we all have experience with that. The voices in our head, usually they're negative, that say discouraging things. When I was doing some self-exploring, I sat and listened to those voices and asked myself, whose voice is that? And I would find family members and remember discouraging things that they said. And through repetition, these things became part of my mind, and I thought they were my own thoughts. But actually they weren't. So once I realized they're not my own thoughts, they're thoughts that somebody else put there that through repetition embedded themselves there, I was able to remove them slowly. It took a while, but I was able to finally recognize what they are. And if they come back, I say, hello, thank you very much for your feedback. I'm on top of this. Don't worry about it.
I'm glad you mentioned this. We all have that in our head, every one of us. And the reason we have that is evolutionary. And I sort of, if we go back to that 10,000, imagine, it's kind of imaginary 10,000-year-old past, where, two friends come out of the caves and one of them says to the other, it's a beautiful day. Why don't we go over those mountains in the distance and see what's happening on the other side? And the more sensible, the two looks at his friend and says, are you crazy? We have no support system. We don't know what kind of animals and beasts we're going to encounter on the way. We don't know where food lies. We don't know where water is. We don't know if there are any enemies between them and the mountains. And we definitely don't want to see what's on the other side. It's probably going to kill us. But, the brave of the two says, I'm going to do it anyway. And he does. And of course, he never comes back, right? Because the odds of making it are so slim. So the one who stayed passes his genes on, and we all end up with this negative voice in our head that's designed to help us survive that past by not doing things too reckless. But in our present, where we don't, being reckless is what we actually need a little bit in order to explore the world, in order to push past our limitations. That works a little bit against us. So what you said, acknowledging it, giving it a persona, understanding that it's there to protect you for your own good, but you also don't need protecting anymore. It's a good thing to actually have.
Yeah, that helped me start putting those thoughts in perspective. And I'll share one more thing in terms of my journey, and then we'll go back to the book and your journey. I'm Greek American. I was born here in the United States, but my family is from Greece, so we're immigrants. And Greece is a country with a long past that stretches into the time of mists, beyond legends into primordial seas. So it's very backwards looking. And that's not a bad thing, but you see that your current life is a continuation of something that started long time ago and is moving forward toward the future. And you have that entire legacy behind you to inform you and educate you and protect you and so far. So we had that. And America is a new country where its mythology is mostly in the future with science fiction and, things like that. So when someone is a first generation person born into a situation like that, they have several options growing up. And I worked with the Greek American Behavioral Sciences Institute for a while when I was working in human services. So you can become schizophrenic. That's one option you have open to you. Because it's impossible to reconcile coming from a glorious and misty past into the future, and then having the glorious misty past where the future is all important rather than the past that you came from. And you could become a Greek American, which is kind of like the culture that rose in the 40s and the 50s in this country. You could identify as American and embrace that culture and see the world in that particular way. You could embrace being Greek and be that. Um, or what I did was I realized that reality depends on the agreement of people. and what they decide to agree upon is real and important. That's what's real and important to them. And just because people in my past made these decisions at some certain point, I'm not bound by them. I can explore them. I can see how they're helpful to me or helpful to the people around me that I love that share the same culture. But I don't need to bind myself to one of these decisions. I can make up my mind, my own mind. And that's at the exploration. And that's how I started becoming aware of how strong these things are. And just like the
Mhm.
bending over when there's no pain, because I'm conditioned to deal with the pain by bending over or moving in a certain way. It was the same thing mentally. I saw how many of my decisions were affected by things that were decided by people who died long, long time ago. And again, what they decided and what they passed on might be valid, but it might not. So it left the door open for me to explore these things rather than accept them or reject them.
There's a lot of wisdom in what you say. We we are in many ways trapped by expectations. And expectations are created out of traditions and they're created out of the past, as you say, because the past has been lived. And
Hmm.
something lived creates an experience. And out of that experience, we create rules and inferences which help guide us into the present. So when we come into the present, the seeds of the present are born out of the past, for sure. But if we only accept the past, then we live only there and we're trapped. We will never do anything differently. We will never see anything differently. We'll be obliged and obligated to carry out those traditions because they worked back then, or they came from things which worked back then. And then we never really truly walk into the future. And the future is what we actually make it, depending on our own perspective or on our own values, on our own drives, or on our own initiatives. And it always takes a little bit of bravery because the future is unknown. Stepping into the future, we are tasked with making decisions which are going to have consequences, and we are unsure about, despite all the intellectual capability we can bring to them. So, and we're talking about life now, but it comes to any kind of situation. So really, in order for us to truly feel alive in what we do, we need to be able to synthesize, as you have done, both. The past is certainly always with us. It's always going to be with us. And the present is going to become past, and the present basically leads us to the next moment. So whatever the present is in the future, it always is beholden to some extent to the past. But it shouldn't be trapped by it. We shouldn't be shackled by what's happened before. You're absolutely right. But that's where the bravery of understanding what drives us, how we got there, and where we want to go actually comes in. And as the old saying, if you don't know where you're going, all roads will take you there.
Right. And
So
some people live their life with that. They'll just go where it takes them.
yes, absolutely. I mean, I think pre-pandemic, a lot of people were quite happy to just go with the flow. You wake up, you do what's required of you. You basically firefight all day. End of the day, you expended all the energy you had. You go to sleep feeling exhausted, wake up, and you repeat the process. And if you're okay with it, there's nothing wrong with it. There's no implied judgment here.
Right.
But if you feel trapped by that, then the only way to actually snap out of it and do what you want is to realize who you are. And if you realize who you are, then you have to ask yourself, what do you want? And then you have to ask yourself, why do you want it? And the moment you ask those three questions, what happens? You begin to set some kind of priorities because you begin to understand what is important to you. So if something is important to you, suddenly the choices you're presented with in the next step of your life or your decision, they're not all equal because now you have a better understanding of who you are, why you are the way you are, and what you want to do.
And that's very important. That wisdom usually comes when you're older. Like now I'm in my late 60s. I'm 66. So I'm very aware of my mortality, and I'm already feeling the effects of being older. And so I know that those will increase in time regardless of what I do. And also because of the Parkinson's, there's certain challenges that are going to come in time as well that I'm going to have to deal with. So I had to really ask myself, okay, I don't know how long my life will last. It might end in a second, but if I went with like norms, I have a couple of decades ahead of me. So what do I want to do with those decades? And I love reading. I love books, and I have thousands and thousands and thousands of books. So I know with my mind that even if I sat down to read them all, and my eyes won't let me do that for very long, I can't finish them all. So what do I need all these books for? So I started giving them, away. And as a person who loves books, that's very difficult. So I find sometimes myself sabotaging this this process. So I have to correct and go on. And I found it very useful to put things under umbrellas.
Mm.
So, like for
You know, go on.
the uh, the exercise, my exercise revolves around Greek mythic themes mostly because I enjoy those. And out of all the things I like Greek mythology, I like metaphysics, I like strange phenomena. So I've titled those together with my podcast so I can continue doing my podcasts or my vlogs, as they call them now. And this way, I can do what I need to do for myself physically, intellectually, and so forth, emotionally throughout the day. And if it's a real need in my life, and it simplifies where I can let go of a lot of things. I thought I would travel once I was retired because I've traveled when I was younger. That is not going to happen if things are the way they are currently in the future. So I had to give up on that dream. So I look back on the dreams that I've attained and I get satisfaction from them. I've attained most of the dreams that I set for myself earlier in life. So I find that finding the answers that you requested that people consider and find and the effect that it does in your life, I can speak for that because once I started simplifying my life became a lot richer.
Yeah, it's I mean, basically you broke free of the past, right? Because and I totally, your book dilemma totally resonates with me. I love books. I love them to the extent that, I when I was growing up in Australia, books were hugely expensive
Hmm.
because at the time they had to be shipped to Australia. It was at the other end of the world. So, just the shipping cost had actually double the price of the book. And as I used to, after school, I used to have a job and I used to spend all my money buying books. And by the time I sort of came from Australia to Britain, I had 3,500 books in my own book collection, which books I bought throughout my life. And some of them were, out of date, and some of them were like a little bit weird because, the choices you make as a 13-year-old reader are not the
Right.
same that you're going to make as a 30-year-old reader. But they were all, to me, they were all priceless because, I used to arrange them sometimes by color. You used to have like, sort of floor to ceiling libraries in my bookcases in my house. And I'd arrange them in sort of sometimes by, by theme or by date, as in sort of the time when I bought them. And then I had to move countries again a couple of times. So I digitized everything and I gave all my books away. And it's not true. I didn't digitize absolutely everything because I had to make some choices.
Right.
So do I miss the feeling of going through those books? Yes, because there was an evocative element to it. I'd think of something I bought when I was 15, and I'd sort of remember the situation of how I bought it and why, and also how I felt when I read it. And now they're all carried on my device, right? Whatever, on my tablet and on my phone. I
Yes.
lost that and I miss it, but it's also liberating because now when I buy a book, I buy it because I'm intensely interested in the subject. And it's very, very pertinent to me. It's easier to navigate. It's easier to recall stuff from. If I need to find a passage, I can do it very quickly. And I don't lose myself in the collection of books I had, which was amazingly evocative, but at the same time was time wasting to some extent. So it's a better reading experience, reading digitally, kind of soulless because you don't have a physical book. But like you said, it's that, and it was a wrench giving them away. I can tell you, I really felt it. I agonized over that. But it was also it took me to a next level, and I needed to get there. So I totally appreciate what you're saying. and it's never easy.
No, it's never easy. And you inspired me with, and you and the Derby team with giving away all those exercises on your site. So I've been giving away I started out with my health books because there I know exactly what I want to do and what I need to do. So getting rid of books that aren't going to help me accomplish that is a little easier. So I've been giving them to libraries and to other local institutions so that they could help somebody else who might need that information for their own particular journey, whatever it may be.
Yeah. So I do the same thing. So yeah, I totally get it. And it does a lot of good things, right? Sort of divesting ourselves from the binds of the past, of sentimentality that actually doesn't have a lot of meaning, really. It just feels good. So yeah, I totally get it.
With me, that thing I got hooked into when I was younger, that I look at it now and I cringe a little bit, is Conan the Barbarian. I used to love those sword and sorcery books when I was 11.
So did I. I'll tell you what, and you say cringe, but no, actually, there is a remorseless logic to it.
Yes,
And Conan is absolutely moral as a character.
yes, he is. He has a code.
Yes. And I think, and a lot of I used to love comics, and I still do. Graphic novels these days, right? But comics. And I grew up in the 70s, and the people used to go on about two things: comic books and television that rotted your brain, right? And now we know how important they are. But if you look at comic books from the time when we gave us Spider-Man and the X-Men and Superman and Batman, and in all those things, we explore morality to a degree that sometimes is lacking today.
Right,
And it's never easy within those comic books. It's not a black and white issue, because a lot of the times you get superpowered beings who are being ostracized and isolated from society because they're different, and they still make the right decision at a detrimental cost to them sometimes, because right is right as opposed to might is right. And
right,
that comes back to Hercules, also the same thing, right? A demigod who was, he didn't abuse his powers, and he basically made the choices that led to him becoming a hero, and his journey was never easy. So I think through those stories we explore scenarios that inform our morality, inform a sense of justice, inform a sense of culture to a degree that wouldn't be possible otherwise. So I have a lot of respect for comic book readers and a lot of love for comic books.
I still have love for comic books, but some of the books, like with Conan, that I reread them, I started rereading them before I stopped. They're basically everything can be solved by cutting off a head or
Yes. But yeah. I mean, he also said, didn't matter if something was supernatural or superpowered. He said, if it bleeds, we can kill it.
we
So,
can kill. Yeah,
but it doesn't get any more real than that, though. Think about it, right? I mean,
true.
I know it within the storyline, but it basically says, this is what it is. And if it reacts like this, we can control it. So you're using a device, in this particular case, is sword, to navigate something which is an intractable problem. So I think it always depends on how you read it, I think. And I just absolutely love them. I'm a big fan.
So you've given Conan another chance. I will revisit Conan.
Good to hear.
Yeah, I thought that that would be a lifelong preoccupation, and I told my wife we'll get rid of Conan and the sword and sorcery barbarians last, because probably I'll still be reading them when I'm in a home of some sort.
Well, nothing wrong with that, I can tell you.
That's a very interesting perspective you have of the comic book heroes. I like the comic book heroes too. One of the things I liked about Conan was he wasn't a demigod. He was a human,
Mm,
and yet he was so singular in purpose and uh, so much who he was and how he navigated through life, that he was manipulated by gods and all sorts of powers, but he never lost his humanity. And
mm,
the Hercules of old in mythology, He was the son of the chief god of the pantheon, but he still made lots of mistakes. You know, he
Yes.
wasn't able to master humanity. But even though he wasn't able to master humanity, he did some awesome things. So I've always taken that as something that we as humans should take to heart. That you know, we're not perfect, and but just because we're not perfect doesn't mean we can't try to make the world a better place, not only for ourselves and our loved ones, but for the world. So that's the
Absolutely.
lesson I found in those ancient mythical figures.
Yeah, I mean, this is a recurring storyline in pretty much any kind of tale that we truly care to examine, which we love. But I mean, coming back to your Conan, so we said he's human, right? And he is. This is why we like Batman.
Right.
Also,
Hmm.
he's not a superpowered being, and he has his own code, and he lives by that. And he's driven. He's very singular in his approach to why he does what he does. He has a clear understanding of it. So, you know, we are drawn to these things because they reflect tendencies and drives in us. We want the world to be better. We want to be able to make a difference, a small difference. We want justice and morality in the world. We want to actually see it as opposed to seeing the opposite, because that world is healthier for us to live in. So these stories resonate for a real reason. And I think, you know, jokes aside, we can all truly actually learn from them. The storyline and their story arc and the fundamental drives of the principal characters. You know, these are things which we should be thinking about.
One of the things I do now, because I don't have the mobility that I had once upon a time, is I do interactive storytelling with kids. So I do mythology, and I also do modern mythology, which is superheroes. So they
Okay.
create their own superheroes, and I take them on verbal adventures. I have maps and little game pieces, and we tell a story together. And a lot of that gets explored in the story, depending on the age of the kids. You know, it's either very superficial or in depth, but it's very interesting to see what the child feels is important. Like some of the superhero kids wanted to cut back on electricity. So they created a superhero that saved electricity and started telling their parents to keep the lights closed, you know, when they're not using them, you know, so they could contribute to the saving of electricity. And that it does say a lot about the power of these figures as figures of transformation. And
Mm.
even a
Mm.
child can get a sense of being responsible for what's going on in the greater world and empowered enough to do something about it.
Absolutely. And here's a little bit of sort of more scientific approach to this. We have a very complex brain that's designed to take in all this information from the world and synthesize it, so it actually helps us make sense of it. And for sure, as we get older, we develop skills which allow us to look at facts and explore truths and be analytical. But the brain isn't actually designed to remember facts. What it is supremely designed to do is remember storylines. And the oral tradition, long before we started writing, was all about that. It's about the narrative. It remembers narratives. And you know, if you ask yourself about who you are, your identity, you and I and anybody else, we are a collection of dots, facts in a massive landscape. But this is not how we see it. We don't see on this date I was born, on this date I did this, on this date I acquired this skill, on this date I learned this thing. None of that. We tell ourselves a story to which we are principal character, and things actually happen, and we acquire skills and we do things and have a consequence and we act on that. And there's a storyline ahead, there's a narrative that actually drives us. And that's the way that the brain actually makes sense of the world. So narrative is supremely powerful, and energetically for the brain, it's a lot less costly to actually store, remember, and recall, which is why we're so good at remembering storylines, but we don't remember facts. So if you say, you know, give me an instance where something went right and something went wrong, and it's a fact stored in your brain, and you definitely have it, as I do, and you can't recall it. But if I say, tell me a time when, you know, somebody did right as opposed to doing something wrong. And, you think of the Camelot figures, you think of Conan the Barbarian, you think of some historical figure from which we have a narrative about, as opposed to the
Right.
facts around them. And that's how we actually remember them. So yeah, narrative is really powerful. And it has also an effect at a physiological level on us. Because if you have narratives in your head that help you make sense of the world, you have less stress, less anxiety, lower cortisol levels, better sleep. So you have good health outcomes as a result of that.
That is such an important topic. I wish we had more time than like 10 minutes to discuss it.
We must do it again.
Yeah, let's do it again. And those narratives are very powerful. People get stuck in those narratives. I just reordered some books on transactional analysis because they do a pretty interesting job with these stories. And they had a book like Games People Play, then Scripts People Live, and Beyond Games and Scripts. And you could see these things play out. Like when I used to work in the human services in a psychiatric hospital, I would see how people cast themselves and other people into these narratives, and you knew that they were no longer in reality when it's all. So all men or all women or all Greeks or all people who exercise or whatever they decided, that was no longer happening in reality. They were uh, consciously or unconsciously casting those roles, and regardless of what the person did or didn't do, it would play out the same way and reinforce that story that they were stuck into.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that has a very closely integrated mental and psychological component, and also a physiological one. So the mind and the body work in tandem within those narratives. So it's actually massively fascinating to explore, because the things that you think have an effect on the way you act, and the way you act has an effect on the way you think, and both have an effect on the way you feel. And feeling is fundamental here.
And you and the others in the Derby team have put that together where you facilitate people interacting through these archetypal stories and get a benefit from exercising. Well, like I remember in Journey when there were treks, there was like marching and other type of movements like that showed you what you would do if you were climbing a mountain. So it was very easy to hook the narrative into that and to get a whole other dimension from doing the exercise rather than just, okay, I have to do 10 of these at level 1, or whatever. But no, now I'm climbing a mountain and look, I found a dragon egg.
Yes, absolutely. First of all, it's fun, right? And
Yes.
exercise should be fun, always should be fun. But also, we know that if you integrate your mind fully into what you're doing, so that you're actually aware of what you're doing and it has importance to you beyond the physiological effects, then the physiological effects are amplified. And there are studies on this. We look at bodybuilders and they usually exercise in front of a mirror. And you see people lifting a weight without a mirror and they're just lifting it. And then people who are actually following the entire movement, seeing themselves lifted, watch the muscles move,
Hmm.
feel a lot. Okay, and this is what we see. Lifting the weight will always have a physiological effect, which is beneficial. You're going to get stronger because the muscle is going to adapt to the lifting process. But if you can actually see yourself doing it, if you can see the muscles moving in the mirror, you can get anywhere between 5 and 15% more out of that
Right.
exercise, even though the set is the same, the weights are the same, same number of reps. And all that changes is that visualization, which then allows the brain to prioritize the way the body is going to allocate energy for the adaptations needed to make the physiological changes that we actually need. And Derby takes this on board. We say if you're into the story and you need to run fast to escape the zombies, you want to become a fast runner, right? So you really want to be as fast as
Definitely.
possible. Yeah. So there you go.
And you can use I use a comic book series, The Eternals by Jack Kirby. I don't know if you're
Oh
familiar.
yeah, I love those. Absolutely love them.
I imagine a divine gym designed by Jack Kirby in the world of the Eternals. And when I'm meditating, I put myself in this gym and I do exercise and I visualize, even though I'm just lying there breathing, I visualize and I see in my mind's eye that I'm doing the exercises and the exercises are making me stronger and
Yes.
so forth. So yeah, and looking in the mirror helps you with the visualization because
Yeah.
you've actually seen it, so you could replicate it in your mind. And they've demonstrated with a lot of sports techniques that you can improve your game by just visualizing it as
Mm.
dramatically as you possibly can and as vividly as you possibly can. And
Yeah, there's been neuroscientific research on this. We know that, what you're doing, lying in bed, basically thinking about being in that gym and exercising. Now, the parts of your brain that are activated as you're visualizing this are identical to if you were actually doing the exercises. And correspondingly, within your body, the body parts which are being exercised are going to go up in temperature a little bit, and they're going to experience a little bit elevated blood flow, like they're actually being exercised. So they're being activated. And what this does, at the very least, is it strengthens the mind-muscle connection, at the very least. But there may be other attendant physiological benefits to this. Maybe the mitochondria become a bit more optimized within the cell walls, so you become a little bit more efficient at how they use energy, even though they haven't been observably exercised through an activity. They actually have, because they got activated. So, this kind of mental imagery, it's been in literature, especially in martial arts, for a very long time, where people meditate about fighting and going through techniques. And now we know that there are observable effects, which are the result of this kind of visualization.
in addition to the derby exercises where I tell stories that I do, like to affirm certain things. Like I do the Hercules ones because I am Hercules. So rather than just saying it in my affirmations, I'm doing the Hercules exercise. So I'm grounding it in reality and in my consciousness. I'm going to start with Built to Last. So I am going to be doing the program exclusively, except for what I need to do with physical therapy and occupational therapy and what I already am set on doing with the derby and my weights. So I'm going to integrate that into what I'm doing. And if you like, I'd like to invite you back at various points and we could discuss what I've discovered on my journey and I can absorb what wisdom you have to offer and insights.
I'd love that. Absolutely. I'd definitely love that.
And we could talk about all these other cool things as well.
Yes.
Now, where can somebody get Built to Last?
You can find it on pretty much anywhere books are sold. If they haven't got it, they can get it in for a couple of days. If you want to support your local community, you can order it online through bookshop.org and then pick it up from your local bookshop. But you can also find it on Amazon. You can find it pretty much any online retailer who will deliver to you. So yeah, that's where it can be found.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised. I thought it was going to be like Journey and some of the other books that you put together for fitness. But then it's like, no, there's words in here, lots of words. So I just thought,
Yes.
and then I was amazed at the words. Like, oh wow, this is like a whole. This is on a whole another level. And how can people get in contact with you, and how can they explore the different worlds that you inhabit?
You can find me at davidamerland.com. I put out a lot of stuff. I get excited by studies I find. I put a lot of studies out there. I contextualize them so you understand how they're important. I write articles and blog articles about things which affect us, whether it's technology or fitness or the sort of psychological elements within those environments. And obviously, if you want to get to derby.com, we have like almost 3,000 workouts now, and we bring out 4 new ones every week.
Wow. That is a great deal. And can you give us we have a few minutes, in addition to last thoughts, can you give us a brief walk through the different books that you've written?
Well, yeah, I've written books on search engine optimization, primarily on semantic search, which is the latest thing. I know we know the world of AI, but essentially the effect of that is carried on through semantic search. And semantic search was really important because it actually allowed machines to understand the real world better, synthesize that knowledge through a kind of algorithm that ascribes specific values to specific facts and cross-references them, and then allow us to navigate the world of information we find ourselves in. So if you go to Google search something, that's the effect of semantic search. And that's what makes it so valuable. I've written things on digital marketing as a result of that, and digital branding, because essentially these are human activities in a digital domain. And we tend to think of them as new. They're not. They have been, there forever. We just take something which happened in the past, we did it in a particular context, and now we are doing it in a different context. And as always, we find some things which we do differently and better. And then we find some things which we do a lot worse because we forgot the lessons of the past. And then I've written books on trust and intentionality. Trust is amazing because without it, nothing happens between it as a relational exchange between people, companies, friends, whatever. If trust is not there, that connection is not there. And intentionality is about how you actually get control of your life. And the sniper mind is about decision making. And I used snipers at the time because they were the ones who had been subjected to extensive fMRI studies, which allowed us to see the thinking brain in action when it makes really critical decisions. And we can learn a lot from that. So in a nutshell, this is kind of a 19-book journey.
That title is what stuck with me the most as I was looking through the books, The Sniper Mind. So thank you for
Yes.
explaining that as well. David, it has been awesome talking to you again, and I will be contacting you so we can coordinate our schedules and continue this conversation. You're an amazing individual. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for all that you've done for me personally and for the very many people who have used the Dare Be site and have gotten the Dare Be books. And now I'm looking forward to exploring your works as an author of many words and deep thoughts.
Thank you so much for the kind words. And thank you so much for actually connecting again. It's been absolutely brilliant. I love this. Let's do it again sometime when you can.
I'm looking forward to it. Take care, my friend.
You too.